excited to have you with me today as I pour gasoline on myself and strike a match here at the beginning of the show because I can't stop thinking about this story. And, occasionally you get something stuck in your head and you just got to get it on out there so you can get it out. But it's a dangerous story for someone in radio to talk about. We have experienced, how shall I do this? We have experienced interesting things during lockdown, particularly related to courtrooms and the like. You had in the New Yorker magazine, Jeffrey Toobin pulling his Toobin out, and on his Zoom call when he thought his camera was off. We have had remember the lawyer with the cat head? He couldn't figure out how to get the filter off in his Zoom call with the judge, and was his head was a cat and it went viral. Poor old lawyer. In Brazil, there was the lawyer who was in court and thought his camera was off and he was having sex, and everyone in the courtroom saw it. As he was quietly trying to, do that with his girlfriend. There was the lawyer, where was it? I think in California, who was at his desk having a conference, and when he stood up, people realized that he not only had no pants on, but no underwear on. You would think that by now, everyone would understand if you're on a Zoom call, a Teams meeting, a FaceTime chat, with a judge, you should probably make sure everything is normal. Well, friends, I now give you Nathaniel Saxton. Nathaniel Saxton joined his Zoom court session as a defendant on charges of possession of drug paraphernalia. Unfortunately, he didn't exactly leave a good impression with the judge because he got on the Zoom call and his username was Butt Effer 3000. Except it wasn't Effer. Oh my gosh. Yes, the judge, Jeffrey Middleton, was not having was not happy. Called Mr. Saxton a yoo-hoo or a yo-ho, and I've never heard anyone call that before, but Bud Effer 3000, he was threatened with contempt of court unless he changed his name, so he got out and had to come back on as Nathaniel Saxton and then spelled his last name and had to apologize, and he blamed his sister, by the way. He blamed his sister and said he was logging on from his sister's account and threw his sister under the bus. His sister is apparently but 3,000. Oh my gosh. Y'all listen. We have had, the pandemic has given us some glorious stories. And I'm sorry, I wasn't going to start the show with this, but it was stuck in my head, and it's one of those things, I just had to get it out of the gate and be done with the story, because otherwise it was going to end badly for all of us. It really was. Now, oh my gosh, I know what I'm going to log in, my next corporate meeting, I know what my username is going to be. And then I'll blame my sister. Okay. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I'm on my sister's computer. Okay. All right. We can move on now. We had a moment of levity because now we have serious stuff to get to. This is not good. Hang on a second. Book of Revelation. Hang on. This is important. This is important. First we got the churches, then we got the vision of Christ, we got the letters to the churches, we got the vision of the throne in heaven, we got the scroll. Let's see. So the first seal, there's the white horse. Let's see, the second seal, living creature says come, and it was fiery red one. And then there was the third seal, and it was a black horse, and the rider was a pair of scales, and the fourth seal was pale horse, and its name was Death. The fifth seal, okay, sixth seal was this great earthquake. The sun turned black, the stars fell, and okay, and then there was all sorts of silence, and then there was the 140. Okay, look, I'm looking, I can't find it, but I thought this was a sign of the apocalypse. Chick-fil-A is facing a shortage of Chick-fil-A sauce. That may be one of the seals. That may be one of the seals. I'm thinking, let's see, Revelation 7, let's see, the great multitude in white robes, the seventh seal and the golden, yep. When he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour, and I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and seven trumpets were given. Another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer. What if the incense was Chick-fil-A sauce, and now we can't even have the apocalypse? Gracious, in many of the 2,600 restaurants, employees have been told, this is not from Revelation now, this is from the news story, employees have been told they're only allowed to give out one sauce packet per food item ordered. Due to industry-wide supply chain disruption, some Chick-fil-A restaurants are experiencing a shortage of select items like sauces. We're actively working to make adjustments to solve this issue quickly and apologize to our guests for any inconvenience. Revelation 7:13. Look, y'all, I'm just reading the news story. I'm pretty sure that this is a sign of the apocalypse. When Chick-fil-A is out of sauces, when God's chicken cannot be dipped in a sauce, it is, I'm fairly sure. Now, Jesus should be able to manufacture, if he can turn a loaf of bread into feeding 5,000 people, surely Chick-fil-A can turn one packet of sauce into 5,000 packets of sauce. But apparently not. We got a fuel shortage. We got a inflation. We got a crime wave. We've got illegal aliens overrunning the border. We've got a war in the Middle East brewing, and now Chick-fil-A is out of sauce. This may be, like, the seals in Revelation, they're all apocryphal language. They're not necessarily literal language. We could be having a sign of the apocalypse here with Chick-fil-A sauces being run out. Then the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared to sound them. The first angel sounded his trumpet. There was hail and fire mixed with blood. Then a huge mountain all ablaze was thrown in the sea with the second. The third angel sounded his trumpet. A great star blazing like a torch fell. The fourth trumpet. Then a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, and a third of them turned dark. That could be a metaphor for the Chick-fil-A sauces. And then there was an eagle, and then the fifth trumpet, and a star was thrown down, and then the locusts, like horses, headed for battle. And then the sixth angel had the trumpet, said, release the four angels who were bound at the great river Euphrates. And then the horse and the riders I saw in my vision looked like this. I'm telling you, Chick-fil-A running out of Chick-fil-A sauce. As long as they don't run out of the Polynesian, I'm not a big Chick-fil-A. Does this make me a heretic? I'm not a big Chick-fil-A sauce eater, but I love the Polynesian sauce. And it looks like the Polynesian sauce is okay for now because it's God's chosen. I am the elect. Now, okay, we got to move on. But we've got Chick-fil-A shortages. We have lumber shortages. We have chicken shortages itself. By the way, good luck going to buy wings at your grocery store. Kroger apparently only has the flats right now. We do have toilet paper, and we do have paper towels. We have a used vehicle shortage. We have a new vehicle shortage. We have a microchip shortage. Corn is now 50% higher than it was. Lumber 4 times higher than it was. This is absurd what we're dealing with in the country. In fact, Chris Wilson, he's one of the best pollsters in the country right now. One of the very few pollsters I trust anymore in the country. He's a Republican pollster, and he put up a list on Twitter yesterday of the massive spikes in inflation that we are seeing in this country, and this is a warning sign for all of us that there's mass inflation happening, even as the administration is trying to tap down on it. I literally saw someone in the Biden administration yesterday saying that if you got rid of the Xbox and the PlayStation sales last year, inflation adjusted would not have been as bad. That was actually someone from the Biden administration making this claim. Chris Wilson put this up. The price of steel is up 145%. Lumber is up 126%. Oil is up 80%. Soybeans are up 71%. Corn is now up 69%. Copper is up 50%. Silver is up 38%. Cotton is up 35%. Coffee is up 34%. Wheat is up 25%. The food index is up 25%. Cattle prices are up 21%. Bitcoin, well, it was yesterday up 470%. We'll get to Elon Musk here in a bit. Home values are up 8%. The hourly wage is only up 5%, and the money supply is up 24%. Reported inflation is at 1% for a month. It's actually 4% annualized, which is not good. That is higher than the Federal Reserve wanted. And on top of this, we've got the petroleum pipeline situation. With the pipeline situation, it has been restored. The flow of gas is forthcoming. Colonial Pipeline says that it did not pay the ransom. It was able to get the pipeline flowing again, and that gas supply should return to normal shortly. I've been watching the index, and the number did grow. I can give you the immediate data. This data is current as of 3 minutes ago. 30% of stations in Georgia are without gas, which is a pretty, well, hang on a second. Nope, let me give you, I got to do it by region. Yeah, so, yep, we got a significant shortage of stations in the metro Atlanta area. Almost all of Atlanta is without gas. I will tell you, looking around, like most of Rome, the gas stations have gas. The Chattanooga area is without it. The northeast Georgia corridor up near Habersham County, the Gainesville area is without it. The further north you go, the better off you are. So, for example, most of the gas stations up in Clayton, for example, have it. Gas stations in Clarksville are hard-pressed. Gas stations in Athens are hard-pressed. You get down 75 towards Macon, most stations in the Macon-Warner Robins area, and then down 75 south of Macon have it. All the way to the Florida line, most gas stations have it. The Golden Isle Parkway down to the coast has it. And then the Savannah area is mostly full because it gets it mostly by port. The problem is you get up I-85 and you head into North Carolina and Tennessee overwhelmingly. Nashville is mostly out. Asheville is mostly out. The Charlotte area and the Greenville, South Carolina area are almost completely out. The Raleigh-Durham area, you can almost see the entire state of North Carolina on the map because it is completely out. All the way from Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina up to Washington, D.C., there's not a single gas station with gas right now, which is why the Biden administration suddenly cares. They did not care the other day, and now because of the metro Atlanta area and the Virginia corridor from D.C. down to North Carolina and the urban areas of North Carolina that tend to vote Democrat, they are out of gas now. And this data is live as of 3 minutes ago. The situation is beginning to improve somewhat. Again, a lot of the stations that were out in the middle Georgia area have been restored. And in North Carolina, in the suburban areas of the state, they have been restored. And in Virginia, the Blue Ridge Mountain area has been restored. It's the Richmond, the coastal areas, and the D.C. corridor that are almost completely out of gas or out altogether. So those areas where Biden voters vote are the hardest hit, and now the Biden administration is signaling that it is afraid of political fallout. When on Monday and Tuesday, the New York Times was still running stories telling everyone there's nothing to worry about, there's no gas shortage. You know, I'll leave you with this point before we go to break. In 2020, hoarders were not to blame for the paper towel shortage or the toilet paper shortage. or the mask shortage or the rubber glove shortage, in each and every case, Donald Trump was to blame for all of it. The media wanted you to know that the hoarding was a logical fallout of the Trump administration sending mixed messages. And ultimately, it wasn't the hoarders to blame, it was Donald Trump. In this situation, suddenly the media wants you to know it's all the hoarders. Joe Biden has nothing to do with it. Pay no attention to the Biden administration. Pay no attention to the relative distrust of government. It's all the hoarders' fault, or Donald Trump's fault maybe, but no, precious Joe Biden, it's not his fault at all.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Hi there, it is Erick Erickson here. I am delighted to have you with me today. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Congresswoman Lauren Boebert makes a great point. Why isn't Hunter Biden involved? He's such a great guy when it comes to negotiating gas and oil prices and figuring out how to strategize petroleum products. Why isn't Hunter out there? Or is he back to smoking Parmesan? I don't know. Hey, there's a warning sign, another warning sign. The producer price index spiked 6.2% for the 12 months ending in April. there continue to be signs of inflation out there we've got to worry about. This is from CNBC. Companies paid much higher prices to producers in April for everything from steel to meat, in another sign of inflation in an economy rapidly recovering from the pandemic. The new data comes a day after a sharp gain in consumer prices sent the stock market reeling. The producer price index rose 0.6% from March, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Year over year, the PPI spiked 6.2%, the largest increase since the agency started tracking the data in 2010. Economists polled by FactSet were expecting a 0.3% monthly increase in April and 3.8% year over year. Now, stock futures were positive after this report, but now things look ugly. According to the Wall Street Journal this morning, it's looking more and more like the stock market. Yeah, futures, they went up a little bit and then they went back down. Stocks may, however, be able to bounce back. NASDAQ's futures are now rallying. And there's a little bit of concern still that inflation is coming. Now, what's so interesting is that, for years, inflation hawks said, it's coming, inflation is coming. And a lot of people said, no, it's not. Back during the Bush years, a lot of inflation hawks were warning, you're spending so much, you're going to get inflation. We never did, and we never did, and we never did. And they have kind of become the boy who cried wolf. But now it's more bipartisan. You've got Larry Summers on the left. You've got a bunch of right-wing economists all coming out and saying, listen, the data is already there. Look at the prices that are happening. We're headed towards inflation. That means the Federal Reserve is going to have to act. And the subtext to all of this, just so you understand, is that Jerome Powell is publicly respected, and behind the scenes, Jerome Powell, there's a lot of doubt about him because he's a lawyer. He's not a longtime hand at Federal Reserve steering monetary policy. When you read a lot of the stories out there about the global response here, you find out the Japanese and the Chinese and the European Union and the British heads of their equivalents of the Federal Reserve are all taking inflation very seriously and starting to rein in the economy as a result. And Jerome Powell's like, no big deal. It's transitory. He's giving a lot of people behind the scenes heartburn. I talked to some of these people, and they all very much like him. They think he's an okay pick, but they also think that he doesn't have the acumen, the financial acumen, to really understand the early warning signs. And one of the chief complaints is that he's more political than perhaps he should be. And there's a real concern about that as well. Inflation is on the rise, and it's not a good thing. Now, when we come back, I got a lot of details about the pipeline situation, what we can do about it. The Biden administration has issued an executive order as well that is notable for what it says, but also what it does not say. We'll get into it. Hi there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I got to play you some audio from Pete Buttigieg. This is first, okay. I didn't really believe people were filling up trash bags with gasoline, but yes, I have seen the video myself. People were, how are you going to get the gas out of the trash bag? I have no earthly, people are stupid. You never, ever, ever underestimate the idea that people are stupid.
We're talking about potentially a weekend restoration, but things are getting really crazy out there. The Consumer Product Safety Commission is warning people not to fill up plastic bags with gasoline. 1 in 10 gas stations in DC is out of gas, and the figures are far higher in the South. Is the Biden administration having any preliminary discussions about potentially taking over the pipeline to restore the flow if the company is unable to do it themselves?
So I've not heard anything along those lines. We are partnering with the company to make sure that on everything from the flexibilities we talked about to technical support and advice, that they're getting the help they need. And they have been able through Line 4 and ancillary lines to move some product, although, again, obviously waiting for determination on fully reopening. I will say that this is a time to be sensible and to be safe. Of course, we understand the concern in the areas where people are encountering temporary supply disruptions. But hoarding does not make things better. And under no circumstances should gasoline ever be put into anything but a vehicle directly or an approved container. And that, of course, remains true no matter what else is going on.
I'm actually kind of shocked that he has to say this, but it is true. Don't use unapproved containers for gasoline, please. Trash bags, plastic bags from your local grocery store, bad idea, folks. And then what do you do to get out? You know, it's like the people who 3 years from now are going to still have toilet paper from last year. They're going to have gasoline they're not going to be able to use. And where are they going to dump it? That's the next. You know, a year from now, Time Magazine is going to be doing exposés on those dirty Southerners dumping gasoline into the environment. You know it's going to happen. Here's Joe Biden.
Very, very close contact with Colonial Pipeline, which is the one area you're talking about where one of the reasons the gasoline prices are going up. And I think you're going to hear some good news in the next 24 hours. And I think we'll be getting that under control. Secondly, I have, in the meantime, made it easier for us to have lifted some of the restrictions on the transportation of fuel, as well as access to the United States military providing fuel and with vehicles to get it there where places where it's badly needed. And I'd also point out that I think what this shows is that I think we have to make a greater investment in education as it relates to being able to train and graduate more people proficient in cybersecurity. And I've been saying for a long, long time now, I know you could probably say it for me, but I think that one of the most important things we have to do to reclaim our place as the leading innovator in the world is to have a better educated workforce. And that goes back to the days a long time ago now, or 5 years ago, and I was vice president, and I surveyed all the Fortune 500 companies, said, what do you most need? And remember what they said, better educated workforce. But they're not spending money to educate the workforce. And but it's important that we do this. And the cybersecurity piece is one I think you're going to see where we need significantly larger number of experts in the area of cybersecurity working for private companies, as well as private companies being willing to share data as to how they're protecting themselves.
The President of the United States believes we need more money in education to train more cybersecurity experts. The president has released an executive order. That executive order is entitled Improving the Nation's Cybersecurity. He's demanding that if you have a contract with the federal government, you begin using two-factor authentication, that all of your security patches be regularly updated and installed, that information be shared among contractors on IT threats and with the federal government. The federal government itself must modernize its IT infrastructure. There's got to be software supply chain security, on and on this executive order goes. It's pretty lengthy in what it does and is going to task parts of the federal government as well with improving identification of cybersecurity vulnerabilities and incidents. But he wants more money in education to train people in computer programming and cybersecurity. Is that going to compete with the 1619 Project Education and the critical race theory? People are going to go through their critical race theory in their local public school and then decide, might as well let people burn down this country because it's a racist nation. Who wants to help save the United States when they're taught in school it's a systemically racist nation? The founding fathers were racist and the institutions of the country are racist. Why would you want to do that? Joe Biden seems to think they're going to want to. Meanwhile, John Kerry is saying we need pipelines to transport the gas.
Isn't it true that pipelines are more carbon delivery efficient than trains or trucks or other forms of delivery? If you could answer just that limited question.
Yeah, that is true. I think that is true. But it doesn't mean you necessarily want to be adding another line when there are other alternatives. But is it better than train and better than that? Yes, it is.
So we don't want to add more if there are other alternatives. What are the other alternatives? I guess more electric vehicles. But it's better than trains or trucks to transmit. Colonial Pipeline wanted to add an additional pipeline. I read an interesting statistic yesterday that if every American were to go out and fill up their vehicle, there would need to be 4 million extra barrels or 4 million extra gallons of gasoline out there. Because most Americans don't drive with a full tank anyway. If they were, you would have to escalate the amount of available gasoline out there, which essentially in the Southeast happened. Colonial wanted to build an additional pipeline, but that pipeline was blocked by environmentalists in each of the states it was supposed to pass through: Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, and parts of Texas. They all blocked to an additional pipeline. It seems like this is a national security issue, but the Biden administration is so intent on getting us off of fossil fuel, they don't want an additional pipeline. You just heard John Kerry say in audio that, yes, a pipeline is more carbon efficient than a train or a truck to move fuel, but there are other alternatives to fuel. They want people in battery-powered cars. Pay no attention to the environmental cost there, please, even though there is one. They want people in battery-powered cars. The problem is they're not going to convert the nation. This is one of the problems with progressive thinking these days, is they just think if they can snap their finger, they can get everybody to do something. They can't even get people to take a vaccine. In fact, they've undermined the people's desire to take the vaccine because of their reporting. And now they suddenly think they're going to get everybody out of a fossil fuel burning car into something else. You know, when people buy cars, they tend to hold on to them for some amount of time, for years. And those cars tend to be fossil fuel burning cars. We need more pipelines. The Biden administration is at war with reality when it opposes building more pipelines. We're going to have more pipelines. Yes, there was panic buying. Yes, this situation is being quickly resolved. I've got 2 gas stations by my house on Monday morning. The one gas station was already out. It's a Circle K. The Citgo across the street had gas. By Monday afternoon, it was out of gas. This morning, they both have gas again. The situation's turning around, but I've got a live monitor up in my office of where the fuel shortages are, and they're still in metro areas around the southeast and up the eastern seaboard, particularly in North Carolina and Virginia. There are all sorts of problems Georgia is a little better off than, and South Carolina is a little better off than North Carolina and Virginia, in large part because of port access for petroleum output in the port of Charleston and the port of Savannah. North Carolina and Virginia do not have the port infrastructure for fuel that Georgia and South Carolina do, so the coastal areas of those states are better. And honestly, the coastal areas of North Carolina and Virginia are also okay, but not as good as South Carolina and Georgia. I'm looking at the map right now. I mean, go over, for example, in Hilton Head, South Carolina, almost every gas station is out of gas in Hilton Head. Go up to Charleston, and the interior portions of Charleston are out of gas, but the exterior portions of Charleston up near the airport, if you're familiar with Charleston, they've got gas into South Carolina. But the Columbia area it's not bad, and the situation is improving. But then you get into North Carolina and Virginia and all the way up to Delaware, you got almost every gas station is out of gas because of the port infrastructure. It's why, again, Savannah and even Jacksonville are almost all the stations have gas. We need more pipeline infrastructure in the United States and the Biden administration, because they want to discourage people from using fossil fuel, aren't willing to invest in the infrastructure needed to install more pipeline, nor are they willing to make it a national security issue so that the NIMBYs, the not in my backyard people, can't block it. So I live in Macon, Georgia, and for years, people at the federal level and the state level have wanted to expand I-16. I-16 is an interstate that runs from Macon, Georgia to Savannah, Georgia. And they would like to make I-16 go essentially from Macon across to Montgomery, Alabama, and over to Meridian, Alabama, or Meridian, Mississippi, and connect into I-20 there. And there is a brownfield and an Indian mound. And it has caused all sorts of frustration for people and has stymied economic growth and opportunity in the area because the NIMBYs don't want an expansion of the interstate that could create jobs, smooth economic transport, and help the area. And also make it more efficient and more environmentally friendly for truckers trying to get from the I-20 corridor over to Savannah. But they just keep blocking it. They keep blocking it because the NIMBYs don't like it. At some point, you got to allow stuff for these sorts of projects to go through. You got to allow a pipeline to go through so that people can get this. But no, the environmentalists, nope. We got to listen. Our national security is held hostage by a bunch of people who are socialists who don't want it because they think it's bad for you and me and the environment, even though they have given us no viable alternative. But Mr. Erickson, if everyone just bought a battery-powered car, we could plug it into the wall. Folks, that's not the world we live in. And the left, their problem as they try to bring heaven to earth is they have designs of a utopia and they think they can snap their finger and get it, but they can't. And meanwhile, you and I can't go fill up our cars in the Southeast because we don't have an additional pipeline. We got hackers. We got the Biden administration saying, oh, it's not our fault. It's their fault. And by the way, we need more people to train in cybersecurity once they go through their woke curriculum to tell them how terrible the United States is and it's not worth salvaging. Good luck getting them to stick around. None of this stuff makes sense. It is the insanity of an insane asylum at large governing this country. They're going to be our ruin. And on top of all that, we've got economic carnage coming. It's that obvious when you look at the inflation rates. I mean, this is just not a sustainable situation 5 months into the Biden administration. You know, the Babylon Bee had a great headline yesterday. Committed to repealing all of Trump agenda, Biden now repeals peace in the Middle East. That's going to have fallout as well.
Well connected and well respected.
Hi there. It is Erick Erickson here. I'm trying to see who is this person speeding past my house. Good Lord, that maniac is, wow. All righty. So, glad to have you with me. The phone number, should you like to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Friends, what are you doing for Memorial Day? What are you doing for Memorial Day? It is a relevant, important question. Why? Because I got a good deal for you. It is the Omaha Steaks Let's Go Grill package. You can get 12 burgers for free to grill on Memorial Day. Have your friends over, have your family over. Throw your masks on the fire. Apparently the standard little blue ones melt, but the cloth ones, they'll burn. Burn your masks and make burgers from Omaha Steaks. Get life back to normal. Go to omahasteaks.com. Put Georgia in the search bar. You'll get the Let's Go Grill pack. You'll get steak. You'll get the 12 burgers for free. You'll get pork chops. You'll get chicken breast. You'll get sausages. You'll get caramel apple tartlets. You'll get all you can eat, and it's delicious. And you know you can add to it. You can get all sorts of extras from Omaha Steaks. They got seafood. They've got they got brisket. You can smoke a brisket. They've got prepared foods, but you're going to get $20 off first order. You're going to get those 12 burgers for free. You're going to save a lot of money, and it's going to be way better value and better delicious flavor than what you'll get in the grocery store. It is because they age their beef. You may not get that at your grocery store. omahasteaks.com. Put Georgia in the search bar. You'll see my name pop up. You'll get this great deal. Save money. Get free burgers. Grill out with your friends and family. I'm still thinking that I don't know. I've thought, so I'm in Macon, the middle of the state of Georgia. Did you know, not far from where I live, the very first baptism in North America happened on the Ocmulgee River? I still think there should be some giant monument. But I've just been thinking, wouldn't it be great to pick a local Middle Georgia brewery and we all get together, those of us who can make it, We bring our masks, we have a bonfire, we burn them, and then we drink. I just think it would be a great idea. I'm not sure. My team is not sold on the idea. Me day drinking and doing a radio show in the morning or the afternoon. I don't know. I personally think it would be a great idea. Nonetheless, we must move on. Did you know? CNN, on its primetime show, as Hamas fired 350 rockets into Israeli territory, spent 90 minutes of its primetime news coverage focusing on Liz Cheney without ever mentioning the escalating tensions in Israel. Did you know MSNBC yesterday, while Joe Biden was having a press conference at the White House about the Colonial Pipeline, was doing a panel on the future of the GOP and Liz Cheney? They're rather obsessed about Liz Cheney and the GOP. For media networks, news networks that insist the GOP is dead or dying and is no threat to the future of America, they sure do act like the rise of the GOP again into power is imminent. And that kind of gives away the game there. They actually know that the Republican Party is not dying or dead. As much as they want to say it, and as much as you have talking heads intuiting it, the coverage of Liz Cheney has been disproportionate to all other news events, from gas shortages to Israel and Hamas. And the reason is because the media is continually, perpetually using the opportunity to try to define the Republican Party as radioactive as possible to try to turn voters off to it in the run-up to the 2022 elections, because they've seen the redistricting data. It is not a coincidence that the Liz Cheney coverage intensified after the census numbers were released, because the situation was playing out before then and there was some coverage of it, but it was amplified after the census coverage came out. And oh my gosh, Republican states are going to pick up enough seats just through redistricting alone that they could take back the House of Representatives. So the media has got to make the Republican Party as radioactive as possible, and they're using the Liz Cheney coverage to do it. Listen, whether you agree with Liz Cheney or not, the House Republican Conference chair is an insignificant position. And I have a hard time believing that people who have friends in the Middle East right now are more worried about Liz Cheney than they are Hamas rockets. I have a hard time believing, as you're in line trying to get gas, you're more worried about Liz Cheney than gas. Yet if you listen to the media, they would give disproportionate coverage to the Cheney situation. It has everything to do with trying to define the Republican Party and put it in a terrible light in the run-up to 2022. They don't care what the real news is. They got to do that. It is because the American media has become a mouthpiece solely for Democratic Party politics. In fact, there's another story out there we should pay attention to related to this. Rebecca Jones, remember her, the nut job from Florida that the media has listened to as some sage and fount of wisdom on the coronavirus situation in Florida? Wait until you hear who the real Rebecca Jones is when we come back. Greetings, how are you? I hope y'all are having a great day. It is Thursday, and I just so happen to be Erick Erickson. That is actually my real name. It is not a stage name. Did you? I did not realize in radio so many people have made up names. I had no idea. But it really is my real name. People always ask me for some reason because people in radio use fake names. But I am Erick Erickson, and the phone number, if you want to talk to me, is 877-973-7425. You can get me on social media, EW Erickson, EWERICKSON, and also EWErickson.com. Do y'all remember back last year, there was constant coverage of Rebecca Jones? She was the dashboard manager at the Florida Department of Health. She single-handedly managed to convince millions of Americans Ron DeSantis had fudged his state's COVID-19 data. This is from Charles Cook at National Review. When I write single-handedly, I mean it, for Jones is not one of the people who have advanced this conspiracy theory, but rather is the person who advanced the conspiracy theory. It has been repeated by others, sure, by partisans across the internet, by unscrupulous Florida Democrats such as Nikki Fried and Charlie Crist, and on television, by MSNBC in particular, but it flows from a single place, Rebecca Jones. To understand this is to understand the whole game. This is about Jones and Jones alone. If she falls, it falls, and boy, does it deserve to fall. Rebecca Jones's central claim is nothing less dramatic than that she has uncovered a massive conspiracy in the third most populous state in the nation, and that having done so, she has been ruthlessly persecuted by the governor and his Gestapo. Specifically, Jones claims that while she was working at the Florida Department of Health last year, she was instructed by her superiors to alter the raw data so that Florida's COVID response would look better, and that having refused, she was fired. Were this charge true, it would reflect one of the most breathtaking political scandals in all of American history. But it is not true. Indeed, it's nonsense from start to finish. Jones isn't a martyr, she's a myth peddler. She isn't a scientist, she's a fabulist. She's not a whistleblower, she's a good old-fashioned confidence trickster. And like all confidence tricksters, she understands her marks better than they understand themselves. On Twitter, on cable news, in Cosmopolitan magazine and beyond, Jones knows exactly which buttons to push in order to rally the gullible and get out her message. Sober Democrats have tried to inform their party about her. You may see a conspiracy theory and you want to believe it's true. You believe it is true and you forward it to try to make it be true, but it doesn't mean it's true, warned Jared Moskowitz, the progressive Democrat who's led Florida's fight against COVID. His warnings fell on deaf ears. Since she first made her claim a little under a year ago, Jones has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars through multiple GoFundMe accounts. And once she realized she was losing a percentage to credit card fees through paper checks, she became a darling of the online left, and by pointing to her own privately run dashboard, which shows numbers that make Florida's COVID response look worse than it has been, she's caused millions of people to believe quite sincerely the state's many successes during the pandemic have been built atop fraud. Stephen Glass, the famous writer turned liar who spent years inventing stories but got caught when he pushed it too far, could only have dreamed of such a result. People like to believe conspiracy theories. People like to believe things that are not true. Oftentimes, people like to believe things that aren't true because it reinforces true things they already believe, or their worldview, their political biases, their biases about people. Republicans have QAnon. QAnon posits that there is a global conspiracy of elite and the deep state peddling child trafficking. The Satanists are behind it, and Donald Trump was elected to break it up. That was the basis of Q, and the conspiracy spun off from there. There are certainly elite child pedophiles, and there are certainly a class of elite people who tend to turn a blind eye to the deviants in their own rank. It doesn't mean they're an organized grand cabal of Satanists organized by the deep state. The Russians did interfere in the 2016 election, but it was not to get Donald Trump elected, and yet the Democrats have reassured themselves Hillary Clinton was not a bad candidate. It's just the Russians helped Donald Trump cheat. And the Democrats have embraced Rebecca Jones. Rebecca Jones inflated her resume, and as Republicans were fixated on the Northeast, in particular Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio, and the deaths in New York, Rebecca Jones came out and said, hey, wait a second, guys. Ron DeSantis and Florida have been covering up their data. And in fact, the Florida data is worse than you know. Jones peddled a resume and claims of insider knowledge, and it was picked up by various news outlets. And even now, when you bring up Ron DeSantis, there are Democrats who believe that Ron DeSantis fabricated Florida's data to make it look better than it actually is. I encounter them on a regular basis, and they are convinced based on Rebecca Jones that it's true. But Rebecca Jones is not a truthful person. Democrats in Florida tried to warn the national media to no avail. Charles Cook at National Review has written a very lengthy profile of this situation. I want to read you this paragraph. Rebecca Jones' journey began on May 18, 2020, on the day she was dismissed by the Florida Department of Health. Today, she claims that she was fired because she had refused to take part in a massive cover-up. But her personnel file shows not only was there no cover-up, but the agency did everything it could to de-escalate the situation around this employee before it eventually became untenable. Indeed, as the records clearly show, indulging Jones had been its approach from the outset. At the time she was hired, the state government knew from its background check that Jones had completed a pretrial intervention program in Louisiana in 2018, thereby securing a no-conviction record for battery of a police officer. It knew she had entered into a deferred prosecution program with the state of Florida in 2017 after being charged with criminal mischief, and yet it hired her anyway. Had she applied for a more important role, the forest of red flags that Jones leaves wherever she goes might well have prevented the mistake, especially given that she did not mention any of them in her application. But Jones wasn't there to fill an important role. She was there to run a website. That matters, for with the enthusiastic help of the press, Rebecca Jones has unremittently inflated the prominence of the position she held. And yet when one reads through the Department of Public Health documents in Florida that chronicle the affair, one is struck by how dull and unheroic the whole thing really was. There were no whistleblowers. There is no scandal. There is no grand fight for truth or justice. There's just a replacement-level government employee who repeatedly breaks the rules, who is repeatedly mollycoddled while doing so, and who is fired only when she eventually renders herself unworthy of the department's considerable grace. Her bad behavior was first formally reported on May 6, 2020, when the IT director at the Florida Department of Health, Craig Curry, emailed the department's labor relations consultant, Tiffany Hicks, quote, looking for guidance on properly documenting actions of one of my employees and to get guidance on proper preparation in a case action needed to be taken. Among the actions that Curry sought to document were that Rebecca Jones had written posts on website and social media regarding data and web product owned by the department and that she works on without permission of management or communication, that she released infographics that should have been identical to data published but were not, and more seriously, that she had possibly exposed personnel data. And then Jones crashed the public health dashboard. The dashboard in Florida, by the way, had been widely credited as being a source of good information throughout the state, showing the state of the pandemic. But the problem was it showed that Florida was doing way better than New York, even though Florida was not being as burdensome and reckless with its economy as New York was with its. And Democrats did not like that. Ever since Jones was canned, She's wanted to claim she was a martyr, and she got just copious amounts of press attention. She was on television. She was cited by reporters. The media made her a spectacle. Democrats made her a spectacle. And they all wanted to use her to get to Ron DeSantis. She is the Democrats' Q. And the media has not corrected the record. Now, most of the media has now distanced themselves from Rebecca Jones. But they've never corrected that she was just making stuff up. They've never corrected the fact that she was fudging data herself. They've used her as a way to beat up Ron DeSantis. And by the way, it doesn't appear to be working. This is from Gary Fineout at the Politico. Ron DeSantis remains on solid ground as he heads into his re-election campaign as Democrats ramp up their efforts to challenge him. A fresh round of polling in Florida shows 3 polls all have DeSantis with favorable job approval ratings more than a year and a half ahead of Election Day, and highlights the difficulty the Democrats will have with the incumbent, who is raking in millions for his re-election effort. At least one poll paid for by a Democrat shows the Democrats may have some openings to go after the incumbent. The poll suggests not all Floridians support the governor's move to ban so-called vaccine passports or crack down on mail-in ballots and drop boxes. The poll, again done by a Democrat, still showed DeSantis with a job approval of 53%, compared with a 55% approval rating in a Florida Chamber of Commerce poll, and a 60% job approval rating done by Ryan Tyson of the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, but he's a Republican. The Chamber of Commerce poll done by an outside independent pollster shows that Ron DeSantis is a double-digit leads ahead of both Val Demings and Charlie Crist and Nikki Fried, the agriculture commissioner in Florida. The 3 polls were done in mid-April and the first week of May. So in the Democrat conducted poll and the Republican conducted poll and the independent poll, Ron DeSantis still has double-digit leads over any of his opponents and a high job approval rating, over 50% in all of them, including the Democrats poll that was done to be most favorable to the Democrat. It doesn't help the media that they relied on Rebecca Jones for so much, and now word has trickled out about what an unreliable narrator of events she actually was, and yet they decided still to go with it because she was useful, because when Republicans were saying, look at New York, they needed somebody to point back and say, well, you think New York's bad, look at Florida. And it turns out Ron DeSantis did every single thing the media and the CDC and Dr. Fauci and even Donald Trump said he should not do. And he came out on top, and his state came out on top. And New York looks like a third world hellhole the way it was operated. In January, Rebecca Jones turned herself in to authorities and is currently awaiting trial. Thus did her stint at the Florida Department of Health end, as her stints elsewhere seem to have ended. In disgrace, in termination, with the cops showing up at the door, and eventually in the filing of charges. Until now, Rebecca Jones has gotten away with it every single time. Eventually, though, her luck is going to run out, and when it does, no amount of flailing or distraction is going to prevent the bills from coming due. The media tried to cash checks on her to get to Ron DeSantis, and instead, she is possibly going to go to jail, possibly. The media won't walk back any of the claims. They won't apologize. They won't correct the record. But it is notable they've stopped listening to her. But how many Democrats to this day still believe Ron DeSantis fudged the Florida data because so many members of the press said Rebecca Jones told them so, and at the time made her a reliable narrator? Republicans have Q. Democrats have Russia stealing the election, and Rebecca Jones is a truth teller. They have their own conspiracy theories, even if they don't want to admit it.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Hi there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Wait, where is this? This can't be true. It just can't be true. I know that can't be true. I know. Okay. Allegedly. No, it can't be true. Nope. Okay, nope. Okay, it's not true. It's too good. It's true. So there's an internet rumor. Put it to you that way. There's an internet rumor that the dark side hackers were able to infiltrate the Colonial Pipeline system because an employee clicked on a link in an email titled "More Like Kansas City," and it was CANSAS City, and the email contained an image of a nude female Kansas City Chiefs cheerleader with the link promising additional pictures. That if you see that on the internet, it is not true. It's almost too good to check, though, isn't it? It's not true. But it is kind of funny to see it being circulated on the internet as you know, this is the most dangerous thing about social media right now. I mean, let's like the Rebecca Jones story. You get a bunch of people on the internet and they start trading a story as if it is true. And tomorrow it comes out, no, I'm sorry, this isn't true. But already people believe it. It's already embraced by people as if it is true when it's not true. And so this is the story. I've got a listener emailing saying they're trying to find a source on the second pipeline. This is from 11 Alive. Let me read you the story. This is an Atlanta news network. Long lines and high prices as the pump are the latest example of how much Metro Atlanta depends on Colonial Pipeline. When the oil stops flowing, Colonial's problems become Georgia's problems. It's happened before. Hurricane Harvey disrupted operations in 2017, sending gas prices to a 2-year high. It happened in 2016 with an explosion in Alabama brought Colonial Pipeline's operations to a halt, resulting in dry pumps and high prices. The pipeline connects Atlanta to the oil refineries along the Gulf Coast. Plantation Pipeline runs a similar route, but it carries less than a third of the fuel Colonial delivers to the area. The refineries along the Gulf are the closest to Metro Atlanta. Several refineries, once located in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, have all closed. Without a pipeline, Atlanta depends on trucks to move fuel from the coast. Now, at one time, Colonial considered running a second pipeline to the area. What they ran into was environmental opposition from each of the states along the way, says who? Andy Lippo of Lippo Oil Associates. That killed the project. So Colonial wanted to build a second pipeline, and the NIMBYs came out and said, no, you can't build your second pipeline. We don't want it in our backyard. Now, let me give you this. This is, again, Andy Lippo is the source of this, Lippo Oil Associates. A single truck can carry 250 barrels of gasoline. The state of Georgia consumes 300,000 barrels of gasoline a day. Colonial considered running a second pipeline, and the NIMBYs said no. The not in my backyard people, the environmentalists, did not want a second pipeline. Now, the Bloomberg, hang on a second, this is breaking news. Let me confirm this. Yep, here we go. This is Bloomberg News. Colonial Pipeline said it did not pay the ransom, but Colonial Pipeline paid nearly $5 million to Eastern European hackers on Friday, contradicting reports earlier this week that the company had no intention of paying extortion fees to help restore the country's pipeline. According to sources familiar, the company paid the hefty ransom in untraceable cryptocurrency within hours after the attack, according to press outlets. This hour of the program is sponsored by my friends at First Liberty Building and Loan. FirstLibertyGA.com is their website. If you are responsible for the financial decisions of a business and you need access to credit capital lending, you need to go to First Liberty. First Liberty, they're headquartered in Noonan, Georgia. They can help you anywhere in the country. Fine Christian family. They've been doing this. The Frosts have. They're the owners since 1993, helping big business, small businesses become big businesses, and they want to help you. Go to FirstLibertyGA.com. That is FirstLibertyGA.com. And thank you to them for their sponsorship. If you're interested in sponsoring the program, drop us a line. We're happy to talk to you as we continue to grow. Now, I got to talk about cryptocurrency. Bloomberg News is reporting that last Friday, Colonial Pipeline paid nearly $5 million to Eastern European hackers. And they did so in cryptocurrency, untraceable cryptocurrency, within hours of the attack. And this is contrary to press reports. Now, you do need to know that Bloomberg News has a history of getting tech stories wrong. They've done a series of very bad and proven false reports, but I suspect they're probably telling the truth here, that Colonial responded quickly and did this in cryptocurrency, because they're not responding. They're not denying the story now. They're saying they have no plans to pay the hackers money. Carefully worded statements, and it's the carefully worded statements of future conduct that should raise red flags about whether Colonial paid or not. But what is cryptocurrency? So many people are talking about it these days, and there are lots of cryptocurrencies. Now, I at one point had bought some Bitcoin, although I sold it. Ethereum is another one. Now you've got the Dogecoin, which was started as a joke, and thanks to Elon Musk has skyrocketed. And cryptocurrency is essentially a non-governmental currency. To understand, let me back this up a little bit. For a very long time, countries tied their currency value to gold reserves. The United States has very large gold reserves at Fort Knox, and for a long time, the country valued the dollar based on the gold reserves. At some point post World War II, I think in the 1970s, the global powers got together, and instead of backing currency based on gold or silver, they came up with what is called fiat currency. And essentially, they set the values of the world's currencies, not based on anything other than the full faith and credit of powers to pay. The United States has a full faith and credit clause of the Constitution. We are required as a nation to pay our debts. We can't get out of it constitutionally. And a lot of people for a very long time have wanted to go back to the gold standard or even a silver standard. The reason being is because they want the money to be backed by something. The money should be able to be exchanged for something. We're not going to do that. It is a product of prior generations. Occasionally, you can get younger people to buy into the idea of backing the currency with a precious metal. And it's an idea of usually senior citizens now who are dying off as people who want our currency to be tied to a precious metal. As opposed to the fiat currency we have. It's the world we live in, and it's not going to change. There's no global backing to change fiat currency. But along comes cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin is the most famous. And essentially, they call it mining, but it's you use an algorithm that is designed and run to find integers that represent Bitcoin, and there's a finite quantity of it, which drives up the value. Based on this algorithm, you can only get so many numbers out of it, each one being a representative of a Bitcoin. It's not a physical currency. It is essentially a digital currency based on this algorithm, and the problem with it is no one really knows with Bitcoin who the financial owner is. Someone out there owns a ton of Bitcoin. Should that person sell their Bitcoin, they're going to be a multi-billionaire. And should they sell it, they will crash the market as well. There are rumors that it is the Chinese. There are other rumors. I'll tell you, one time I had someone tell me that cryptocurrency was the mark of the beast. I'm not kidding. They actually believe that. They're nuts. It's not. Everyone knows the vaccine is. It's not either, by the way. It's not either. But I know people believe it is. Nonetheless, that there are varieties of cryptocurrency. They've been doing well, and the latest explanation for the surge has been they're an inflation hedge. Now, what a lot of people are doing, it's wishful thinking. Governments could ban cryptocurrency tomorrow. China now wants to do a digital currency and convince people to use their digital currency, a renminbi, as a way to challenge the dollar. I wouldn't invest in Chinese currency, but the Chinese want you to, and a lot of people who hate the United States will. Cryptocurrency makes sense if you understand that it is backed by an algorithm that is itself limited in its ability to scale. It provides some level of value, but it's not something that you can readily cash into dollars. There are some ways to do it, but it's very difficult. Now, what really set off the Bitcoin craze in the last few months has been Tesla. Elon Musk of Tesla declared that Tesla would allow people to buy Teslas with Bitcoin. Elon Musk has been a proponent of cryptocurrency as a way to get away from government-backed fiat currencies. But yesterday, Elon Musk said this: Tesla has suspended vehicle purchases using Bitcoin. We are concerned about rapidly increasing use of fossil fuels for Bitcoin mining and transactions, especially coal, which has the worst emissions of any fuel. Cryptocurrency is a good idea on many levels, and we believe it has a promising future, but this cannot come at great cost to the environment. Tesla will not be selling any Bitcoin, and we intend to use it for transactions as soon as mining transitions to more sustainable energies. We are also looking at other cryptocurrencies that use less than 1% of Bitcoin's energy transactions. You see, what's going on here is to get more Bitcoin on this algorithm, you've got to run computers. I've got a friend of mine who runs graphics processor cards on multiple computers at one time trying to find more Bitcoins. By essentially, the computer runs a bunch of mathematical calculations over and over and over and over and over. And the amount of energy use for Bitcoin is extraordinary because of so many people using Bitcoin. And mostly it's younger people using Bitcoin. And this is from CNBC. Elon Musk's decision to stop Tesla from accepting Bitcoin as payment has led to fresh scrutiny of the cryptocurrency's environmental impact. Critics of Bitcoin have long been weary of its impact on the environment. The cryptocurrency uses, pay attention to this one. Critics of Bitcoin have long been weary of its impact on the environment. The cryptocurrency uses more energy than entire countries such as Sweden and Malaysia, according to the Cambridge Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index. To understand why Bitcoin is so energy intensive, you have to look at its underlying technology, the blockchain. Bitcoin's public ledger is decentralized, meaning it isn't controlled by any single authority. It's constantly being updated by a network of computers around the world. So-called miners run purpose-built computers to solve complex math puzzles in order to make a transaction go through. This is the only way to mint new Bitcoins. Miners do not run this operation for free. They have to shell out huge sums of money on specialized equipment. A key incentive of Bitcoin's model, known as proof of work, is the promise of being rewarded in some Bitcoin if you manage to solve its complex hashing algorithm. It's worth noting that Dogecoin, which has risen wildly in price lately on the back of support from Elon Musk, also uses a proof-of-work mechanism. Carol Alexander, a professor of the University of Sussex Business School, explains that Bitcoin mining is difficult. A measure of the computational effort it takes to mine Bitcoin has been going up and up over the last 3 years. More and more electricity is being used. That means the network difficulty will also be going up, and more miners are coming in because of the hash rates going up. Bitcoin's price is almost up 70% so far for the year, And as it goes up in price, the revenue to miners also increases, incentivizing more participants mining the cryptocurrency. Janet Yellen has warned that the digital coin is extremely inefficient for making transactions and uses a staggering amount of power. Now, if none of this makes any sense to you, good. This is part of my problem. I use the Warren Buffett rule. If I can't understand it and I can't explain it, I don't do it. So I had some Bitcoin and I sold it. I'm just not a big fan of the idea of cryptocurrency. We don't know who really controls it behind the scenes. There are some that we do. So, for example, Ethereum is a cryptocurrency that is more power efficient, doesn't have all of the crazy requirements that Bitcoin does. But is it really currency? Among Bitcoiners and the black market, yes. So there's this thing called the dark web. When you open an internet browser, you see the public web. But about 20% of the internet is called the dark web. It runs on the same lines, but it can't be accessed by your internet browser. It takes a very specialized internet browser that knows where to go on the series of tubes known as the internet to find the dark web. And the dark web is where drugs can be sold and bought. Human traffickers and prostitution are engaged. People can find hitmen. You can find child pornography. All this stuff is on the dark web. It's readily available. There's even a Wikipedia that when you launch the particular browser, I think it's called the Tor Onion browser, you launch it and you essentially land on a Wikipedia page that catalogs all the places you can go on the dark web. You want to buy drugs, go here. You want a human slave for sex, go here. You want to dabble in child pornography, go here. It's not a good place to go, and the odds of your computer getting hacked grow exponentially the longer you stay on the dark web. It's not worth it, people. But Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is what is traded on the dark web because it's untraceable, because it's not centralized by a system. So, for example, your federal dollar, if you pull out a dollar bill from your pocket and look, it has a serial number on it. And the federal government can track that serial number through the flow of banks to you. You can't do that with Bitcoin. So people on the dark web use Bitcoin, and then they use an exchange rate that converts it into dollars on the other side, and they get their money back in ways they can spend in the real world. That's why governments don't like Bitcoin. But the bottom line is that, for example, with Bitcoin, we don't know who's the biggest owner. The person has not revealed themselves. There's a lot of speculation it's someone in Asia. There's a great deal of speculation it's someone in communist China. And if the person ever dumped their Bitcoin, they would become a billionaire, and the other people who own Bitcoin would go broke pretty quickly. I understand the allure of it. A government doesn't control it. It's very libertarian. But there are a lot of dangers out there. I don't really care about the environmental dangers if I'm honest about it. I think they're largely overstated. But governments have that concern because to get Bitcoin, you have to perform intensive calculations on a computer, and that does use a staggering amount of energy over time to be able to do. You're pulling energy away from other things. We just don't get it from unicorn farts. You got to produce the energy. And if it's going to Bitcoin mining, it's not going to anything actually useful on the planet. And so Tesla has decided not to do it. Now, what's so interesting here is that Elon Musk drove up the price of Bitcoin, collected a bunch of Bitcoin, continued to drive up the price, and has now said, well, guys, we're going to hold on to our Bitcoin now that the price has gone up, and we're not going to accept any more of it because of the environment. Tesla, of course, is a company that has made a ton of money by portraying itself as environmentally friendly. Elon Musk does solar panels through one company now owned by Tesla. It does batteries that can store energy for houses to use. It does a battery-powered car. And so you've got Elon Musk suddenly engaging in Bitcoin that's hugely power inefficient. And it's a bad look for a company that gets so much money and tax credits for its environmental efficiencies. It makes him look like a hypocrite. I'm sure there's more to the story than we know. But ultimately, the bottom line is Elon Musk helped drive up the cost of Bitcoin, acquired a great deal of it, and now says, hey, guys, I'm going to hold on to all this Bitcoin right now. We're not going to use it for anything. And good luck getting more. And the Bitcoin market has now tanked. which has caused a lot of fanboys of Elon Musk to now feel betrayed by him. The whole thing, again, goes back to Warren Buffett. If you can't understand it, don't engage with it. And most people don't understand it, but a lot of people engage with it. They consider it a hedge against inflation in the market. But is it really against a hedge against inflation when no one actually spends Bitcoin? They call it a currency, but who spends it other than criminal gangs on the dark web? And what do? They convert it back to American dollars. It's not really the impressive thing that so many people think it is in real world application. You're not going to the grocery store and spending Bitcoin to buy your groceries.
I really do like his opinion on things.
Erick.
Hi there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Has Black Lives Matter weighed in yet on Colonial Pipeline being called Colonial Pipeline? Have they come out and cheered Darkside for taking on Colonial Pipeline? You know what the competitor Colonial Pipeline is? Plantation Pipeline. No, I'm not making that up. You got Plantation Pipeline and you've got Colonial Pipeline. And I have not yet heard Black Lives Matter weigh in on this, and I'm not sure I know what to think about the whole situation until we get some buy-in from Black Lives Matter on Colonial Pipeline being taken out by Darkside and Plantation Pipeline being their competitor. I'm just not sure if we can find out really what to believe. Maybe we need to get Black Lives Matter to lay the pipe in the country, but my goodness, that would probably not go over well either. I don't know. It's just a thought that's been circulated in my head. Maybe I shouldn't be so free in sharing my thoughts with you guys on this issue. We shall move on to other things, shall we? I got to correct something I mentioned yesterday. I got to get the timeline right here for you. I actually went back and did the work so that you all will be able to get this. If you subscribe to my Substack newsletter, you're going to get this later today. But I want to go back to the Israeli situation real quick. So it was 1000 BC. In 1000 BC, King David set up the kingdom of Israel. Now, Saul had already tried to unite the tribes. David, though, makes it official in 1000 BC, United Kingdom. After Solomon, it broke into two pieces, Judah and Israel. The northern kingdom collapsed and was absorbed into the Assyrian Empire in 721 BC. Judah collapsed and became part of the Babylonian Empire in 597 BC. The Babylonians fell to the Persians and Cyrus in 538 BC. Around 500 BC, the Jews go back and set up the homeland. In 333 BC, Alexander the Great took over Israel. In 63 BC, it became a Roman province. They called it Judea. In AD 70, the Romans destroyed the temple and ransacked the people and spread them out across the land. And then in AD 135, Hadrian barred Jews from living in Judah. And he changed the name to Palestine. Syria Palestinio. At first, it became Palestine. The Palestinians are not a tribe of people. They are a variety of people, mostly Arabs who moved in, some Christians as well, and kind of became a people over time. But if you embrace the phrase Palestine, what you are embracing is the Roman persecution of the Jews. Because from 1000 BC until AD 153, that area was known as either Israel or Judah. It was recognized as the former kingdom of Israel. It was only after AD 153, or 135 rather, that with Hadrian ordering all Jews out and renaming it to Palestine, that the word Palestine came into being. Now, who was there prior to the Israelis, prior to the Israelites? It was a variety of tribes, and the land was called Canaan, and you had Canaanites and Amorites and Edomites, a whole lot of people. But you did not have Palestine. You had Philistines, but you did not have Palestinians. It is now Israel. And when people say Palestine, what they are doing is they're embracing the historic persecution of the Jews. You know, the Jews, the Israelis now, bend over backwards to make sure they don't kill civilians. And sometimes civilians are killed, but they work very hard to make sure it doesn't happen. The Hamas terrorists from the Palestinian territories are perfectly happy to kill Jews and kill Israeli civilians. That actually should matter in the conversation.
30.
You know, Israel blew up Hamas's headquarters yesterday. They dropped a dummy bomb to signal they were going to blow it up. And then they called all the people in the area and told them they needed to evacuate the area. And an hour later, they blew up the building after giving all the heads up to tell people to leave. Hamas
15.
just fires random rockets into Israel, hoping to kill Israelis. Those facts should matter. And of course, the media doesn't ever cover them. Hello and welcome. My name is Erick Erickson. If you hadn't figured that out yet, I am here to keep you entertained for the next hour. The phone number is 877-97 Eric, 877-973-7425. Delighted to have you with me here. You can get me on social media at EW Erickson, and you can go to ewerickson.com every day. And I need to deviate from what I was going to talk about for a moment. My daughter came downstairs this morning. She keeps herself very informed with the news. She wants to be as up to date and knowledgeable. She's kind of the person who knows what's going on in the world that all the kids at school ask her about. And she asked me this morning what the situation in Palestine was, which actually set me off probably more than it should. And I've been thinking I probably need to explain to her when she comes home from school why it to use the word the kids use these days, triggered me. When I was a kid, I grew up in the Middle East. I grew up in Dubai. Until I was 15 years old, I never set eyes on an Israeli flag. Our encyclopedias in our library, there was this thing, for those of you younger than me, there were these books where you could learn the knowledge of the world. They were called an encyclopedia. The section on Israel was cut out of the encyclopedia. To the extent they could not cut out the encyclopedia pages, they used black marker and covered up the words so you could not read them. Our maps in our school either were blacked out or were substituted with an overlay that said Palestine. I remember when I was 15 years old, I was on a class trip to Greece. Now, I had a very different growing up experience than probably every one of you listening. My senior year in school was ninth grade. Our school only went up ninth grade, and then you went to boarding school. And so you took your senior class trip in ninth grade. And our senior class trip was to Greece, to Turkey, and the Greek Isles. And we fundraised for a year. We would come to the United States and buy bags of American candy and then go back to Dubai, and we would sell them and raise money as a way to raise the money for all of us to be able to afford to go on the trip to Greece. We went to the Greek Isles. I've been to Troy. I've been to Athens. I've been to Sparta. I've seen Agamemnon's death mask. I've been to Mycenae. I've seen Corinth. I've seen the canal. I've seen Sparta. I've been to Marathon. And I remember in the Agora in Athens, at the base of the Acropolis, looking up and seeing all the flags of the world, and there was one none of us, 15-year-olds, none of us had ever seen. And it was a white flag with blue bars and a blue six-pointed star, the Star of David. And our teacher asked us, and we were all highly intelligent kids, and our teacher asked us if any of us knew what that flag was, and not a single one of us knew. We could name every single flag up there. We had to memorize it. Well, we took a geography class. My teacher, Mr. Lake, we had to learn every single country on the planet. We had to learn all the major mountains, all the major rivers, all the oceans. We had to learn the flags of every country. One of our tests was nothing but flags. And you had to take the flag and you had to write down the country it belonged to. We memorized all the flags. We memorized all the countries. We memorized the capitals of every country on the planet. Except Israel. We never learned about Israel. It was Palestine. So when I hear the word Palestine, I immediately distinctively recognize propaganda. I recognize people who want the elimination of the Jewish people in the Israeli state. The word Palestine is derived from Syria Palestinia, which was the name the Emperor Hadrian gave to Israel when he drove out the Jews in 153 or 135 AD and barred them from ever returning. Other people came in, some were imported into the land to take over the territory. Only when the empire became Christianized were the Jews allowed back into their native land, by then referred to by everyone as Palestine, though it never was. The Palestinian people is a play on Philistine, but no people were ever called the Palestinians. It was an embrace of the persecution of the Israeli and the Jewish people. So when I hear media outlets and activists refer to Palestine, a nation that does not exist, what I hear them referring to is the propaganda campaign that I was exposed to as a child, where I was never even allowed to learn about Israel. I was not allowed to go to Israel. I was not allowed to have Jewish friends because Jews were not allowed in the country. In 2020, the United Arab Emirates and Israel made peace. Donald Trump and Jared Kushner orchestrated a peace deal, and the United Arab Emirates and Israel, for the first time in their histories, have peaceful relations. In October of the year 2020, that is less than 1 year ago, for the first time in history, you could make a call from Dubai, where I grew up, to Tel Aviv. Until October of last year, the Arab nations would not permit a phone call to be made from anywhere in the Middle East to anywhere in Israel, because to them Israel did not exist. Until the end of last year, a friend who was one of my teachers growing up, who was on the edge of retirement, sent a group of us a note and said he had lived long enough to see the new textbooks come in, and for the first time, Israel was in the textbook. For the first time, the Israeli flag can be seen by American kids growing up in Dubai. For the first time, you can read the history of Israel, and you can read it from an Israeli perspective, a factual perspective. And that's thanks to Donald Trump, by the way. He doesn't get credit for it. He should win the Nobel Peace Prize for it. You will notice that the Arab nations are staying out of this conflict between the Palestinians and Israel. I grew up believing there was a country called Palestine, and it was a lie. It was a propaganda campaign organized by Arabs who were raised to despise the Jewish people and to want them dead. There are still countries on this planet that declare death to Israel and the United States. The Palestinian people are a group of Arabs who lived in the area after the Romans persecuted and drove out the Jews and took over their lands and collapsed totally and tried to erase the history of the Kingdom of Israel. There's plenty of archaeological evidence. You know, we've uncovered the seal of Hezekiah, who for years biblical secular scholars said was just as mythical as David. We have Hezekiah's seal. We know Hezekiah lived. In fact, there's a story in the Bible that the king Hezekiah converted the temples and altars of the pagans into bathrooms. We have found the altars converted to the bathrooms of Hezekiah, complete with his seal marking it as so. It's a true story. It's in the Bible. People thought it was mythology. People thought it was just Judeo-Christian mythology. It's a real story. We have found them exactly where they said they would be, in the walls of a city. I was raised to believe, not by my parents, they wanted me to know the truth. But in the school that I went to, by government fiat, I was raised to believe Israel was not a real place. And the Jews were not real people. And to the extent they were monsters who persecuted the actual owners of the land, the Palestinians. The truth is that the Palestinian people were widely abused by the Arab nations And after World War II, when Israel was set up to finally give the Jews back the territory the Romans had taken from them after Hitler's monstrous acts, many of the Palestinian people, they refused to move and to recognize the claims. They were pushed into the land of Jordan and Syria and Lebanon and Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and they were treated far worse than the Israelis have ever treated them. But they were raised to believe the Israelis were monsters and terrible people who wanted them dead, and they have for years acted out and lashed out and refused to recognize the legitimacy of Israel. Israel has a claim to that land that goes back before 1000 BC. You can reject God in the Bible and their claim to it by divine right. You can say there's no such thing as God, and who cares that your imaginary sky god gave the Israelis this land. But you cannot deny they conquered it thousands of years ago. United tribes set foot into land that, by the way, they had lived at until exile in Egypt, and they came back to it and took over the land, and they drove the others out. By divine order, by the way, but if you reject that, it's like saying the United States is not entitled to the United States because the various Indian tribes were here first. Never mind a United States people came in, first as British colonies, then as United Front, and they took over the land. Or if we use that logic now, I guess we're not allowed to say that we own this country. Israel undoubtedly had claims to that land that go back thousands of years, but through multiple persecutions, from first the Persians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and then the Romans, then the Nazis and the Western powers, and then the Arab nations, they still have maintained a claim to the land, and it is the Arab nations and the left that have perpetrated a mythology that this was Palestine. Palestine does not exist. It has never existed. And so I'm bothered by the people who talk about Palestine, because they're peddling propaganda. And one of the main reasons for that propaganda is a product of the Cold War, where after Israel was started, it flirted with the Soviets, but wound up allying with the Americans. And so the Soviets allied with the Palestinians and Arab nations around them, including the Syrians. And do you know the Syrians are run by the Ba'athist Party, and the Ba'athist Party is the Arab Nazi Party. Historic fact, by the way. Iraq under Saddam Hussein and Israel under Hafez al-Assad were the Ba'athist Party, which is the Arab Nazi Party. Conveniently, for those who hate Israel, they forget that the Ba'athist Party are descendants of the German Nazi Party. How often do you hear that? It's historic fact. And the Soviets sided with them because the Nazis were always their kissing cousins anyway. So when you hear Palestine, you are hearing propaganda by the left. You are hearing a propaganda campaign that tried to wipe Israel out of history books and out of geography books and out of encyclopedias. You are hearing the claims of those who hate God's people. You are hearing the claims of those who wish to revise historic fact. And you are hearing the claims of those who are deeply opposed to the West and Western values. And if you use Palestine, or you come across others using Palestine, you'll forgive me for not only not taking you seriously, but understanding you are a propagandist, because I lived through your propaganda. I grew up in your propaganda, and I did not know the truth until I was 15 years old, and I refused to be bullied into claiming any sort of legitimacy for any idea called Palestine, and the rest of you should know the truth as well.
He doesn't just have a radio show.
All right, I got to give it to CNN. They're actually dealing with this issue. Good for them. This happened this morning on CNN.
So if you've been to the supermarket recently, you know it's costing more to buy just the basic items to feed your family. Food prices are rising in a lot of parts of the country. A New York grocery chain reporting spikes in prices of meat and chicken and produce and seafood. In April, consumer prices rose at a rate not seen since 2008. That's according to the Consumer Price Index report released today. Let's bring in now CNN's Vanessa Yurkevich. Vanessa, so explain to everyone what's causing this price increase and what is seeing the biggest jumps.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, just about every American consumer product is up right now in price, including food, specifically produce. Here at Morton Williams in New York City, they're seeing a lot of price increases, including lettuce. Boxes of lettuce they used to buy for about $20 a box. Now they're buying for about $30 a box. Also, filet mignon, they were buying for $11 a pound. Now they're buying for $17 a pound. Also, strawberries, they're buying for $5 to $6 a basket right here. And this is about double what it was last year. And each of these prices are getting passed down to the consumer.
Chicken cutlets were going for 89 cents a pound, are now going for $2 a pound under the Biden economy. This, by the way, again, it's worth noting, this is why the media is focused on Liz Cheney. The media would much rather talk about Liz Cheney than anything else in the world right now. They would rather talk about Liz Cheney than they would rather talk about the crime wave that's happening, inflation that's happening, the rioting across America that's happening, the Israeli-Hamas situation that's happening. You name it, they would much rather talk about Liz Cheney. The gas shortage that's happening, they would far prefer to talk about Liz Cheney than talk about the gas shortage that's happening. Because if they did, it would reflect poorly on the Biden administration. If it did, it would reflect poorly on the policy outcomes right now that the Biden administration is advancing. The Biden administration is actually desperate for a bipartisan deal on infrastructure, in large part because they want to show some collaboration with the Republicans right now and get the heat off Joe Biden. Mitch McConnell, though, is drawing some bright lines on the infrastructure plan.
Yeah, we're not interested in reopening the 2017 tax bill. We both made that clear to the president. That's our red line. We believe that in February of 2020, we had the best economy we've had in 50 years. We believe that was a major reason for it. And so, from my perspective, this discussion about the way forward on infrastructure will not include revisiting the 2017 tax bill.
Not include the 2017 tax bill. That's kind of the bright line for the Biden administration, or for the Republicans right now, and I don't blame them. They have no interest at this point in dealing with that. They have no interest in engaging with the Democrats on trying to raise taxes on the American public right now. Meanwhile, what do the Democrats think the biggest problem in America is? White supremacy. And of course, the media is rushing to grab hold of that and claim that, yes, in fact, white supremacy is a very big deal. While they're advancing critical race theory in schools, they are very, very, very happy to advance the idea that white supremacy is the greatest threat to the North American continent right now domestically. I beg to differ with them, but this is where we are as a people right now. As more and more Democrats embrace the idea that Republicans are uniquely terrible people, and in so embracing the idea of the unique terribleness of the Republicans, they get a pass on having to deal with anything normal in the country. Now, when we come back, I want to play you the audio from the Attorney General and the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, both of whom are insistent that white supremacy is the biggest threat. As Americans are in line trying to fill up their car today and can't get gas. And as Antifa burns down cities across America, even now, somehow it's white supremacists who are the thing that the government most needs to be concerned with. That should tell you all about how screwed up things are right now with the Biden administration in this country. Wait until you hear the audio. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Glad to have you with me here today. I want to play you this audio as promised. This is the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, and Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas testifying before Congress.
So let me ask first, Secretary Mayorkas, is it still your assessment that white supremacist extremists are the most lethal threat we face in the homeland today?
Mr. Chairman, I do believe that the intelligence reflects the fact that indeed that is the case. And I very much appreciate your question with respect to the resources that we could utilize to enhance our efforts to combat domestic violent extremism. And three lines of work come immediately to mind. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, we have created a branch to focus exclusively on this particular threat stream. And that branch can use additional resources so that we have the analytic capabilities to best assess the threat and provide information to our state, local, tribal, and territorial partners to equip and empower them to address it in their communities.
But you do agree with your predecessors that white supremacist extremists remain the most persistent and lethal threat in the homeland?
I do believe they do at this time, Mr. Chairman.
And Attorney General Garland, do you agree?
I do, and that's the most recent assessment of the FBI.
Oh, we're going to believe the FBI now. All right. I actually think that white supremacy, white nationalist activists, let me hit the record here so I can save this for posterity. I believe that white nationalists, white supremacists are a domestic threat in this country. I do. And I think they're more likely to be threatening with a Democrat in the White House. I do. I am deeply perturbed and disturbed, though, that the Biden administration and the FBI believe them to be the most serious domestic threat in the country. Because they're not. The left in this country refuses to acknowledge that Antifa is anything other than cuddly teddy bears while American cities burn. While people lose their jobs to a mob, a left-wing mob, corporations are shaken down by a left-wing mob. Portland, Oregon is on fire regularly. We've seen the rioting in Washington, D.C. and New York City and Kenosha, Wisconsin. Around the country, we have seen violence. We've seen organized efforts at political conventions where the left-wing mob is dropping off bricks and pipes on street corners, and somehow or another, the protesters know exactly where to go to get their bricks and pipes to protest and ransack and vandalize, and yet white supremacists are the greatest domestic security threat. They are a threat. And they are organizing in North Georgia, outside of Rome, Georgia, a group of neo-Nazis or some such has been plotting violent extremism. They deal in drugs, and they're plotting violence against people they suspect as being sympathetic to Black Lives Matter and Antifa. They're there, and they are a threat, and we on the right should not dismiss the threat. But I think people on the left overstate the threat and downplay the threat of Antifa, which I'm sorry, I can't remember. When did white supremacists burn down a city in America? When did white supremacists march through Buckhead in Atlanta, smashing the windows of high-end fashion stores? When did white supremacists march in Washington, D.C. or in Kenosha, Wisconsin, burning down buildings? When have they tried to take over federal buildings in cities like Portland, Oregon? I can't recall. Maybe it's happened in the last couple of years, but I can't recall it. I don't want to downplay it. but I think that the left is overplaying it, and they're overplaying it because it's convenient for them in ways to rally their own side. At this point, the left and the media in this country join hand in hand as one entity, believe anyone who votes Republican is a white supremacist. And to the extent they believe that's actually a threat, they think it's a threat because it challenges their political power, not because of violence. And so they play this up to try to scare the American people, and also because they are trying desperately through any means necessary to keep black and Hispanic voters from going to the GOP, something they have been unable to stop. So they play up it's the white supremacists, it's the second coming of the KKK and the skinheads out there, but they're not the ones burning down cities. They're not the ones engaged in violent protest. But they're the ones who generate the moral outrage and the fear scenarios in the media because it's convenient for them to do as a way to tie it to the Republican Party and try to convince black and Hispanic voters the Republican Party is somehow inherently, intrinsically, fully bad and you should stay away from them. There's a credibility problem, though, as the media revs this up. First of all, people are more and more mindful that the left is advancing critical theory out there. My buddy Chip Roy, he's been on the program repeatedly, congressman from Texas, has introduced legislation into Congress to ban federal dollars from being used to use critical theory in public schools in this country.
Growing up and learning and listening to Dr. Martin Luther King, being judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. When I think about Chief Justice Roberts in 2000, I think 5 or 6, the Supreme Court opinion talking about the sordid business it is of divvying us up by race. Well, we're divvying up our entire country by race and teaching our children that America is evil. That's happening right now. If there is one upside or bright spot to the last year of operating under the pandemic rules and a lot of the silliness that has caused so much destruction and killed jobs and sent our children, unable to go to school, it's that the veil has been lifted on a public education system that is corrupting the very ideal of being American. It is happening right now with federal tax dollars being taxed, borrowed, or printed recklessly with $6 trillion over the last year. That money is being funneled directly into public education institutions, K through graduate school, that are teaching our children that America is evil, divvying us up by race, teaching our children that they should be apologetic for their race. It's happening. This is real.
It is real. And what are they teaching? I mean, look at what Disney was teaching in its diversity, equity, and inclusion courses. That if you were a white person who did not internalize you were a racist, you were a racist. That by virtue of your skin color, you're a racist. I mean, I want to explain to you what they actually believe. That they actually believe that we should have separate dormitories for people based on race, that we should have separate food halls in universities for people based on race, certain cafeterias, that you should have whites only and blacks only Zoom meetings. To the extent that that's white supremacy, then yes, that's a real threat, but that's coming from the left. That's not coming from the right. And it also, all of this conspires to undermine people's trust in the government, conspires to undermine people's faith in the government, which is why, there's all the data suggests that when the government botched the Johnson & Johnson vaccine rollout, they caused people to grow in skepticism of the vaccine to the extent we're now having to run a lottery to get people to do it. The state of Ohio is going to give 4 people $1 million. We're going to raffle off $4 million spread out over 4 people for those who get the vaccine. You get the vaccine, you'll get a raffle ticket. Here's the governor of Ohio.
2 weeks from tonight, on May 26th, we will announce a winner of a separate drawing for adults who have received at least their first dose of the vaccine. This announcement will occur each Wednesday for 5 weeks, and the winner each Wednesday will receive $1 million. The pool of names for the Ohio Vaccine Million drawing will be derived from the Ohio Secretary of State's publicly available voter registration database. Further, we will make available a webpage for people to sign up for the drawings if they're not in a database that we're using. The Ohio Department of Health will be the sponsoring agency for the drawings, and the Ohio Lottery will conduct them. The money will come from existing federal coronavirus relief funds.
They're having to pay people to get the vaccine. Now, a listener emailed me yesterday and said her company is actually putting money in people's extra money in people's health savings accounts if they get the vaccine. They're actually giving money to people. Now, another listener tells me that her company is actually giving people financial bonuses actually in their paycheck if they will get the vaccine to come back to work. Companies are having to step in, and they're having to do it against doubt in the very same government that wants you to believe the biggest threat in this country is not a virus, is not gas shortages, is not inflation, is not anything other than white people. They're the biggest threat in this country. It's casting all sorts of doubt across the nation on the federal government. Even Sanjay Gupta now is having to admit that the federal government is screwing stuff up. Sanjay Gupta on CNN was talking about Susan Collins' criticisms of the Centers for Disease Control. Now, if you're not aware, this is Susan Collins yesterday.
So here we have unnecessary barriers to reopening schools, exaggerating the risks of outdoor transmission, and unworkable restrictions on summer camps. Why does this matter? It matters because it undermines public confidence in your recommendations, in the recommendations that do make sense, in the recommendations that Americans should be following. I'd like you to respond to why the CDC is not following the standard procedures, why it's having offline secret negotiations with one stakeholder that was revealed only through reporting and a FOIA request, why it is exaggerating outdoor transmission. We know that masks make a big difference indoors. They don't outdoors.
That was Susan Collins yesterday in a Senate hearing. And now here's Sanjay Gupta from CNN.
Yeah, it pains me to say this, but I see where she's coming from, Senator Collins, on this. I mean, I think for a long time, the concern was the CDC was providing guidance, at the beginning of the pandemic that was not scientifically based. And as a result, we didn't do things that we should have done in this country that could have greatly mitigated what has happened here. And now I think it's almost a little bit of the reverse problem. The science is not necessarily being followed to the same extent. And as a result, we're probably doing things that we don't need to be doing. So, in the end, the CDC needs to be just a science-based organization. What does the science say? You don't need to wear a mask outside. It's just one of these things that, again, we've known this for some time. We didn't know in the beginning. We've all learned a lot over the past year, but now we know it's not clear that there's really been any cases of outdoor transmission, maybe a couple of cases throughout the last year in the entire world that have really been documented. So it just doesn't happen very commonly that this virus spreads outside. It doesn't like to be outside. It doesn't like UV light. There's all these different things, but again, now we know that. Indoor masking, we know that the country, it's hard to paint the country with one brush. Let me show you. There's areas of the country that still have much higher viral transmission than other areas. We know that, more than half the country is still unvaccinated. So if you live in a place where where it's red, which is about a third of the country, then you should still be very mindful of the fact that less than half the population is vaccinated. There could be a lot of viral spread there. You probably have to have more caution. Indoor masking. If you're vaccinated, I don't think you need to wear a mask indoors either. So this is what the science is sort of showing, and I think the CDC just needs to probably say that. They're erring on the side of caution. I get it. I think we've all been traumatized here. But I think, at this point, it has to be very clear what the science shows and what you can do as a result of that.
And the government's not doing that. We have a complete breakdown in trust of the government. The left didn't want to trust the government because Donald Trump was in charge and they questioned everything, even if it was right. Now we're at a point where you just simply can't trust the government. It has nothing to do with partisan affiliation. Certainly, people on the right are more likely to question the government when Democrats are in charge. But overall, the CDC, on a bipartisan basis, is undermining trust. And yet the same is true when it comes to the Department of Homeland Security and the Attorney General, both saying that white supremacists are the biggest domestic threat, while at the same time, you've got critical race theorists in schools telling essentially everyone who's white is a racist. We've been hijacked by the wokes. The crazy people in the insane asylum, they've taken over. And it's very hard to figure out who to believe anymore. Truth should matter more than anything else. And it's real hard these days to figure out what really is true. Not your truth or my truth, the actual truth. And that's got to matter and triumph over everything. And it's not with this administration, with the CDC, with the teachers' unions trying to reopen schools. Randy Weingarten, by the way, the teachers' union president, finally out saying they want all schools to be open next year. Clearly, she must have seen some polling that parents are about to revolt. You know, in Alexandria, Virginia, they've kept schools closed all year. They said, that's okay. This summer, we will do in-person learning for summer school. If kids fell behind, they want to get ahead, they can come this summer. And now today, they are saying, actually, we're not going to do that now. Parents are furious, and it's going to hurt the Democrats. Inflation is going to hurt the Democrats. The crime wave is going to hurt the Democrats. And they're all scrambling, saying, white supremacy, you got to keep us to protect from white people.
You can follow Erick around social media at
I forget how many it was. It was like 80. Someone ordered a pile of Eden Pure thunderstorms yesterday. We got a note, someone from Georgia, and they forgot to use the discount code. Don't forget to use the discount code. Eden Pure thunderstorms. If you don't know what they are, they're a great handheld. And by handheld, I mean they're small. You can hold it in your hand, and it's a great portable air purifier. And with the spring and summer getting here, with mold and mildew and bacteria in the air, the fungus in the air, the Eden Pure Thunderstorm air purifier is guaranteed to kill and prevent the spread of mold, mildew, and fungus and black mold. It's filterless as well. You don't have to change a filter. And I can't recommend it enough. It eliminates odors. We use it in the kitchen when we're frying and cooking smelly stuff, fish and all. It eliminates the odors. You can keep one in your car. It can run with a USB cord. You can plug it into the wall. It's just so well designed. If you want one right now, they've extended a deal. It was only going to be last week, but they've extended it to this week. You can get a 3-pack. You'll save $200. So you get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorm air purifiers for just $187. The regular price is $387 for 3. Shipping is going to be free, so you save $200 for 3 of them. And you get shipping for free, and it takes care of black mold and fungus, all this. I cannot recommend it enough. It's such an ingeniously designed product. You go to EdenPureDeals.com. That's the website. Eden, like the Garden of Eden. Pure, like pure is the driven snow. Deals. EdenPureDeals.com. And at checkout, use my name. You're offered a checkout code. Eric is the checkout code you want. In fact, if you go to EdenPureDeals.com, you will also see my name. If you click my name there, you can see this great deal. So you click on my name, and you get, right now, the Eden Pure Thunderstorms. You get 3 of them. You add it to the cart, and then you will see when you're going to pay, you click on checkout. And when you pay, you put in the offer discount code, ERICK. You click apply, and boom, the price goes from $387 to $187. But you got to, when you check out, click the checkout button and put in the discount code ERICK, ERICK, and you'll get taken care of. It's EdenPureDeals.com. Get this great 3-pack of the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. It is a lifesaver, particularly if you've got bad allergies like me. I got to play you a quote from John Kerry, the eminently quotable John F. Kerry.
You have a very enormous challenge, but very important one in front of you. Secretaries Blinken and Pompeo both said that the CCP is committing genocide against the Uyghur Muslim population. Last month, this committee marked up a bill I introduced along with Chairman Meeks condemning this genocide. You recently said that were quoted saying, "We have other differences on human rights, but those that should not get in the way of something that is critical as dealing with climate." And I know you can try to compartmentalize it. The problem is it's intertwined, because when you look at the supply chain, you look at China, they dominate the critical mineral supply and solar supply chains, all coming out of the Xinjiang province, which we believe is using slave labor to create these renewable energy sources.
Jumping ahead.
Thank you, Member Nicole. It is a problem. Xinjiang province not only produces some of the solar panels that we believe are being, in some cases, produced in forced labor by Uyghurs, but also there are a significant amount of rare earth mineral that's used in the solar panels themselves.
So he admits slave labor in China is being used to generate the solar panels. And you know what his solution is? To do nothing. The Biden administration admits slave labor is being used to make the solar panels, and they intend to do absolutely nothing about it. Where is the moral clarity that John Kerry used to campaign on? Where's the moral clarity of Joe Biden in this? They know slaves are being used to make the solar panels, but they're more worried about white supremacists. Oh, wait, but they're not the ones running